welcome back to the Noise Filter podcast. This week we have John Vogel. How you doing, John? You all right?
Yeah, I'm doing real good.
Cool. How's your week been? Good?
Yeah, well, it's been a holiday weekend here in the United States, Thanksgiving weekend, and actually the theater, the comedy theater that I produce shows at, has been pretty busy. I mean, they took the immediate holiday off, but it's been like nonstop show schedules back and forth. So I've done a little bit of performing there, producing there, light and tech work there. It's actually been really busy.
Excellent.
So even though it's a holiday weekend, New York does not slow down.
Stay rest for the wicked.
Yeah.
So could you describe a little bit about what you do to people that don't know?
Yeah. So to put it in one word, I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
In terms of what that actually means, sometimes I'm an actor, sometimes I'm a writer. Sometimes I'm a producer. I've dabbled in directing, but ultimately, everything I do is in service of making people forget about the bullshit in their life and laugh for a second.
Yeah, lovely. That's pretty cool. Lovely. That's a pretty sweet job, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly not all flowers and rainbows. There's a whole lot of weird self-analysis that you have to do that gets very uncomfortable at times. But it feels good on stage. That's what it's all for.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what projects have you got going at the minute then?
Right now the big things I'm focusing on are just continuing to bang out my stand-up act. I'm trying to get to like a 30-minute special worth of material. I feel like I'm around halfway there. And that's just a great thing to work on day in, day out, sort of like going to the gym, because you're working on writing and performing at the same time, which I think is something unique to the world of comedy.
Yeah.
Because in the world of drama, you have to be one or the other. It doesn't translate at all. In comedy, it translates like big time. And the other thing is I'm writing a pilot on spec right now called Damien, that I'm close to getting, a near final version of the pilot. And that's sort of been my first time screenwriting on my own and finishing something.
Yeah.
So that's exciting, because I've co-written some stuff before, but there's that. Yeah, and then another thing that's sort of looming in the horizon is an independent film called The Trouble, which is sort of it's Tarantino-y in terms of like the mix of like comedy and action. But it's I have one of the lead roles in it, and it's been in post-production for a very, very long time, like multiple years, because it was made on such a low budget. But I've seen it finished now. We had like a private screening, and I was pretty happy with it. I think it's exciting. It's really exciting for that to like hit festivals next year.
That sounds great. That'd be really cool. That'd be pretty interesting. So, what's your process for your screenwriting? How do you sort of go through that? How does that work for you?
So I would say there's one thing that I'm willing to admit that I do, that I think a lot of people do and don't admit that they do, which is have you ever been to the website tvtropes.org?
No.
Okay, so TV Tropes is basically Wikipedia for media. So that's anything from comic books to movies to TV shows to cartoons to anime to real life. But anything that's media, they sort of deconstruct the tropes and like what they are and how they're used. And honestly, like the depth of coverage, I feel like you can kind of make up for film school.
Excellent.
Like I didn't go to screenwriting school. I was in a weird position where all of my childhood friends all went to film school, so I absorbed a lot by osmosis and by like acting in their projects. But yeah, that's something I do. Is I come up with like a glimpse of an idea, just something that I think is a fun idea that I would enjoy writing about. So like most recently, my idea was, what if that shitty internet troll in the YouTube comments was literally the devil's son? And then from there you ask, like, if this is true, what else is true? So it's like, okay, well then, he must come from a broken household. He must act out in class. you know, if his father's the devil, then his mother has got to be like a vice president at Goldman Sachs or something evil like that, you know. And then from there, I start to come up with. Then I go to TV tropes and I just like look at what shows I liked did, and sort of use that as a foundation and a basis, almost like just like, oh well, they had these four characters, use a similar thing but make them slightly different, something like that.
That's like
That's,
that sounds
yeah.
quite good. I like that. I've been curious about writing for a little while, and I've read a couple of books that like sort of or I'm in the process of reading that Dan Harmon, the book that Dan Harmon loves. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh yeah.
Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, I think is what it's called. Which kind of describes like how every
Yeah, I haven't read that. I'd like to.
It sort of talks about how every story is like you can break down the beats into like a story circle, which is what Dan Harmon does. He creates the story circle,
Right,
but like,
right.
And so everyone crosses the threshold. They start at like unhappy, and then they cross the threshold, and then they go to the point where they try and make some changes, and it's like yeah, it's really good. As a writer, I'd imagine it'd be massively useful.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't read that one particularly, but it sounds pretty interesting. I've read a lot of stuff on Reddit, actually. That's been a good resource. Stephen King's On Writing book is fantastic. I've been taking improv classes, which, despite the fact writing is technically banned from them, because then it's not improv, it has made me a stronger writer because it's like flexed that muscle in a way that's been really useful. And also I had the benefit of growing up in like a very writing-focused household. My dad was a songwriter. So I grew up sort of exposed to that creative process, and I think that's a good foundation that I'm lucky to have.
What sort of things influence your comedy and stuff?
I mean, other comedy, a big part of why I love doing it is because I've loved watching it, and it's like. A certain part of it's just like, well, I've watched so much comedy, like, if I don't do it, then was wasting my time. Like I want to jump over and not just be a fan. And part of it is I've always liked the idea of taking different elements from different like fields or like different goals and putting them together. So like, I don't know. I like the idea of like combining certain, like, what would it mean to be the Bruce Lee of comedy, and thinking about it like that, or like come up with different people, the Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know, like I find that's a good way to find like that sort of context for yourself.
Is there ever a point where you sort of reach writer's block, or does that ever sort of occur for you, or can you just churn it out? Does it just come freely?
No, I get writer's block and I get all depressed. Like I just start drinking, I pick up that bottle real quick when writer's block sets in, and it doesn't help, but I do it anyway. It's tough, but I find that it's good to be fluid and to be adaptable, and like what my approach is, whenever I hit writer's block, I just run away and I work on something else.
Yeah.
And that's one of the good things of like, one of the things in comedy world, and I think like the indie music world is a lot like this too, where it's like you've got to be a little bit of everything. You've got to be able to write, you've got to be able to perform, you've got to be able to produce, you've got to know how to direct, you've got to sort of really DIY it. So that's one of the things is if I hit writer's block, then I just focus on producing. I set some meetings and I'm like, oh, okay, we got to talk to these guys, and bouncing. And a big shout out to Zeph Choda for sort of exposing me to that. He's a good friend of mine. He runs Alphabet City Films, which produced The Trouble. He directed The Trouble, but kind of seeing him grow from just an independent filmmaker doing short films to like making a feature and like doing everything himself, I'm like, oh, okay, like there's a comedy version of doing that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to seek. So that's why I'm like bouncing around from like sketch comedy troupe, improv, to stand up, to writing, to acting in this movie, to producing live shows, just because momentum is key, and you got to build the whole portfolio these days because the industry isn't there to like sell your soul to anymore. Like if you take your soul on an open auction, it doesn't get you anything. It's like you get like two buttons, like a half-eaten Rice Krispie treat, and like a little bit of pocket lint, and that's it.
That's all one soul is worth.
Yeah, these days, yeah, back in the 80s, apparently you could get like a 14 record contract or like a movie deal. Nowadays you get like, I don't know, half a bologna sandwich.
It's a buyer's market, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. The supply and demand curves are so screwed up, and it's crazy because it's on every level.
Yeah.
It's like that in like the film production side of things, but it's like that down to like the comedy club level of things too. And it's all just arbitrary TV, like it's all the same thing. It's all just like arbitrary, just gatekeepers who happen to be there because it was right place, right time, and like the only way to get through is being right place, right time.
Yeah.
Like when I've had auditions for comedy clubs where they were like try again in 6 months, and they're like they kept saying like what would Mitch Hedberg do? They would say like, oh yeah, what would like how could you be more like Mitch Hedberg? And then it's like kind of everyone who studies the history of stand-up comedy knows that Mitch Hedberg was not popular in clubs, and like he was able to make his career because he was good on TV.
Yeah.
So it's like, and how to get in the club, they're like, oh, how do you be more like him? And I'm like, huh, it seems like maybe it was the market forces were just bigger than what was going on there, and hey, props to anyone keeping the lights on and like providing the space, but also it's showbiz on every level.
Yeah, yeah. Does the has the internet changed the gatekeepers much, or is it just now a river of shit filling filling the airwaves?
No, there's no. I think the internet's completely changed it. Like you can just plug and play and make money on YouTube without like having to go through a gatekeeper. But in that case, the gatekeeper is kind of the people and the algorithm, but like creating content that like people are looking for and want. Because that's something I'm working on doing too. I forgot to mention it because I'm juggling so many projects right now. Mostly to ward off against writer's block. For when the writer's block hits, I can just jump to another one and keep them all sort of pushing along. But another one I'm doing is at this SoloCom festival, which is actually a pretty noteworthy festival. Some like pretty big productions have launched from it. But it's like the whole thing is it's an experiment where you like do a one-man show and it has to be all new content. And I'm like sort of I'm like a like borderline conspiracy theory nut. I'm very entertained by conspiracy theories. I think they're very silly and fun, especially the ones with aliens in them. And like, so like I just really enjoy consuming that stuff in my spare time. So I made like a conspiracy theorist character who's like an amalgamation of various conspiracy theorists, mostly Alex Jones, but not political, but just like loud and talking and being like, I like guns, I like steak. But like talking about like aliens and stuff like that. And I did a one-man show as him, totally improvised, and it went great. So I'm gonna try to turn him into a YouTube character. Excellent. And like just push that out there, because I think at this point I'm starting to think, just from breaking through, I think your odds are just as good, if not better, on the internet. So like, why not focus on it?
Yeah, lots of.
It's a different format, but it's one I could have fun with.
Yeah, it's a good idea to like have a good portfolio of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and you look at like Donald Glover, right? This guy's now like he's got like multiple hit rap albums. He's got an Emmy for his own show that he also produced and directed and stars in. Yep. Like he's in all these movies. He was in Community, which was a fantastic show. And all that came from him doing internet sketch videos while he was in college at NYU. Amazing. Like he was doing the Derek comedy videos, and because of that, he's like in Spider-Man, he like, and he's done a little bit of everything. So shout outs to that guy because I've enjoyed his content for a long time, and he's sort of bounced around and did a little bit of everything. And that's inspiring. I was like, you know what, I can do that too.
Yeah, I think if you're willing to put the work in, you know, it can happen, can't it? I think people just have to. You just need to just grind it out, don't you? Just keep trying and see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's work ethic is everything, and you see that in the because I do stand up and improv in New York, which is like, you know, it's kind of one of two big hubs for either one of those, and you just see it on the open mic scene or like in the improv jam scene. Like you see the work ethic of like people putting in the work and like trying to hone the craft, and like you see it pay off after a while. You know, I host an open mic, and then you definitely see the difference made between the people who like are really grinding at it versus the people who are just kind of like dicking around.
Yeah, for sure. Where
Like
do you
even on that level, you know.
where do you hope to be in like sort of 5 years? What's your sort of trajectory? What are you hoping for?
Well, I I hope to be on a beach covered in cocaine. that's that's where I'd really like to be.
And what are you doing to facilitate this cocaine beach?
No, I think the artistic integrity is more important. I don't know. It's hard to say in 5 years, just because, like, I feel like we're in a point post internet in all of show business. Like, you know, on the music side, as well as the film side, as well as the TV side, as well as the, you know, live theater side, live event side. Um, I think the internet really changed everything, and no one should get too used to anything working any particular way.
Yeah.
So, so it's like in 5 years, I'd like to have I, have some sort of, you know, profitable show set up in the most direct way possible. Because that's one thing, is I want to sort of bypass traditional advertising as much as possible. And I've worked like on the business side of traditional marketing and advertising. So like I kind of want to go as direct to consumer as possible, which I think the internet allows pretty well. And you can kind of do on the local live level too, but there's a lot more overhead in doing that than there is just pumping out content to YouTube. Um, and but who knows what that's even going to look like 5 years from now. So like a big part of it too is just like, I think being independent and being at the sort of level that I'm at, I think it behooves me very much to put a lot of stock into where our audience is shifting.
Yeah.
What does the new thing look like? Because if I could have it my way, I would just be a clone of Conan O'Brien with a late night talk show, because that's what I watched, that I loved, that made me want to do this. So I would just do that the way he thought he was doing Johnny Carson. But I have to look at the mirror and say, you know what? Late night talk shows aren't going to exist in the 10 years I would need to grind to get one. Like, that's just no longer going to be a format. So like, I better be paying attention to what the new format is, so that I can position myself to be the, you know, the ideal talent for that.
Yeah. What about something like...
Or just make it myself.
Yeah. What about something like sort of Patreon or Twitch? Is that interest you?
Yeah. Twitch is something, because I was a gamer too. Like, I was a pretty big gamer growing up, and I would like get on voice chat with my friends, and we would just talk shit and like have a good time, like while playing games. And that's literally what Twitch is. I totally understand the appeal of Twitch, but for some reason I was just too much of a wuss to get on it, or like I didn't feel like putting the time in, or I was too distracted by day jobs or whatever. But I feel like I missed a boat on Twitch.
Yeah.
Like I go and watch Twitch now, I'm like, ah, man, it's kind of too late to get in with my style of thing. But I wish I had gotten in early, because that would have been a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Patreon's interesting, but I find Patreon's a thing where you have to be famous for something else first in order to get a good response for it, or become hated by a very controversial internet celebrity. That seems to be the other thing that seems to spike up Patreon. So social media war.
Maybe
Like
you
there's
should
also like,
maybe you should start a war
Patreon.
against. Maybe you should pick a celebrity that everyone hates and start wage war on them. Social
I
media
don't know,
war.
man. I'm like I read too much about Buddhism to do that.
Oh, good on you. That's very nice. That's the right answer. It was a trap. So
Yeah, yeah.
what if you could like if your distribution if you could like think like if you're thinking like towards the future, would you be sort of hoping that like to be on this like new whatever this new platform is? Because I mean there's like Kickstarter. I've just done Drip, which is brand new. That's something that's quite similar to like Patreon. But like how does your what are you making? What is the thing gonna be that you're gonna be doing?
Well, the thing I'm starting right now, the experiment I'm doing right now. I think I'm gonna do the way I'm gonna look at it is I'm gonna do multiple experiments just based on ideas I have.
Yeah.
So like one experiment is the animated pilot I'm working on. I'm gonna try to shop it around and get a representation for it. But if I don't, I know enough funny actors who are friends of mine who I could get to do a recording on spec. I could like self-produce like a YouTube series.
Yeah.
Maybe raise like $4,000 on Kickstarter or something like that, depending on when I looked at the budget items what it would look like, but it wouldn't be obscene, and maybe raise that because that's doable. I have a wide enough network where if I put that out there, I could probably make a goal like that.
Yeah.
And then so that's one thing that I can do, and that's like a plan D after trying to shop it around the industry for a few years and seeing where it goes. Probably nowhere, but I think it's good. So it should, it could, if it's the right place, right time, it could. And then the other thing is that conspiracy theorist character I made for that festival. I found that I watch a lot of conspiracy theory videos, and like that's a very specific subculture and very specific like fringe of the media, but there's a lot of people watching them, and they're very boring.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you manage to make like fucking Nazi aliens living underneath the ice in Antarctica, like with UFOs that may or may not be fallen angels because like one of the like banned books of the Bible like described the mountain range that was in Antarctica that no one knew about and like all that stuff. How do you take that and make it boring?
Yeah.
Like it's like this droning 90-minute video with like a still image of like just some dude who like sounds like a priest in Louisiana, like I don't know. So I made this dynamic character who's very entertaining to listen to, and I'm gonna do like conspiracy theory videos and see how that market responds to my character, because I think there's an underserved need there. So I'll like find out very quickly whether that's viable or not. And that's another thing I'm trying right now. And then I've got other experiments on the pipeline. I want to record a 30-minute stand-up set when I can, and also shop that around to maybe just self-produce that. Maybe like cut little simple short film vignettes, like sort of how like Seinfeld used to do, or more recently how He Who Shall No Longer Be Named apparently. Who had a very good TV show that we're not supposed to like anymore.
Yeah.
Like how he did it. Like I might try to do something with that format.
Yeah, a lot of fallen heroes, isn't it, recently?
Yep, big time.
Yeah.
It's big time, and it's shaken the community too on really like on the local level too.
Yeah.
Like every sort of performance venue, as far as I know, in the country has had their own like town hall meetings, and I've witnessed a few like comedy theaters in the New York area just within the span of a week they disappeared because there was a controversy at the top, and like you can't even figure out what the controversy was because it was just poof, gone in a cloud of smoke. And that's like people spent money on classes there. That's the thing, is you kind of have to invest in one of those theaters as a performer to an extent to like take in what they have to teach, and then also get the performance space. That's just sort of how they're set up.
Yeah.
So like people had like spent money and like years there, and just poof, it's gone. And that's on the local level. Like forget about all the stuff at the top. But the thing is, in comedy, you're used to fallen heroes.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that Robin Williams killed himself. There's so many people who've killed themselves or overdosed. And you just sort of get used to it. Or even if they don't, something else goes horribly wrong. It's just sort of, you're dealing with a group of largely flawed people who, that's just sort of, there's a point where you realize all your heroes are dead, and you're older than they were, than they died. And you're like, wow, maybe I need different heroes.
Yeah. I think comedy is like, I think comedians ride the sort of the crest, the edge of sanity, don't they? So it's like they plumb the stuff that is like dark, and well, the people that I like anyway, plumb the kind of dark depths of the mind, and that's where they find the comedy. And I suppose it's those types of people that are like most vulnerable, isn't it, at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is anytime you like do any sort of workshopping or class type of situation in the comedy world, what it always comes back to is truth.
Yeah.
If you tell the truth, it'll become funny.
Yeah.
You can't just totally fabricate stuff. Like it's just hacky and cheesy and no one likes it. And yeah, so you always have to be sort of vulnerable. You always have to put stuff out there. And you have to think about those things while you're writing. And like that's one thing about stand-up in particular, where like you can't, like Jack White used to say that he preferred writing songs about other people's problems rather than his own, and he would like people watch and like come up with fantastical characters, these people, but based on like a real thing. And like I get to do that when I'm like writing a script or like a sketch or something, but you don't get to do that in stand-up. Stand-up is like you're the main character. So like there's a bunch of shit I'd rather not talk about, but it's like that's where my mind goes when I write, and like I'll sit down to write, and it's like, okay, like it's kind of painful to write stand-up because you have to like sit down in a chair and be sad.
Yeah.
It's like it's rough, but it's rewarding when you get something just right.
Yeah, I bet. I dream of writing comedy, and so in my mind I quite often see myself as the protagonist in my own sitcom. And so when terrible things happen, I just think like, this is just content, isn't it? This is like, as terrible as this event was, in like 2 weeks this is going to be really funny. And so I suppose that mentality is kind of like, I suspect that's probably how a lot of comedians work, isn't it? You just take those tragedies and kind of think, this is going to be gold. What is it, like pain plus time equals comedy?
Yeah. No, that's a very true equation. It's funny, they say that more. I think they say that more in like the UK comedy world than the US comedy world, but I think it's true.
Yeah.
I think the US comedy world should say it more, and because I think we're kind of forgetting that right now. But yeah, that's the thing, is because it's about humanity. It's like the same kind of vibe as like, I'm sure there's a million reasons why people like punk rock, but the reason why I like punk rock is because it's very like raw and human and vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's like, I find that you just transpose that. It's the same streak, it's the same attitude, and that's really cool. But it's also weird because like I've never really seen myself as the protagonist of my own life all the time. Like most of the time I'm more like one of the wackadoodle side characters. Like, if you've seen Community, I'm kind of like the Abed in my life, in the play of my life. There's some other Jeff Winger, but I'm his like zany deconstructive sidekick. And I don't even know who the Jeff Winger is. I just know that I'm the Abed.
Yeah.
I find different wingers. But that's sort of that. Yeah. That's why it's like, hey, if anyone out there needs to cast a side character who's a funny hacker, I think I could play that. I think that's
the role for you.
I did an online poker player in The Trouble, and I think the natural next step is a funny hacker.
Yeah. So we did talk a little bit briefly, but I didn't really get what I was looking for. What specifically? What kind of stuff has influenced you? So, like, you know, British comedians, American comedians, shows. Is there anything that like is the thing that particularly fires you up, or is there, or is it just loads of stuff?
Adult Swim comes first and foremost in my mind. Like Adult Swim has its whole lifestyle brand, and comedy is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And it's a very particular type of comedy. It's very absurdist. It's very surreal. It's very silly. It doesn't take itself too seriously, you know. But it's kind of like smart, you know. It like tries. I've always really liked almost everything they've ever put out. One of my personal goals right now, I guess it also ties into your 5-year question. 5-year question is like that pilot I'm working on. I'd really like for that to get on Adult Swim.
Yeah.
That would like that's one thing that I could like point at, you know, 14-year-old me and say, look, you achieved a dream. You know.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. I'm also really inspired. Conan was a huge influence on me, like just his particular weird, nonsensical, middle of the night thing. That's the thing. I really like deep, late night, weird comedy. You know, John C. Reilly is one of my favorite comedic actors. Will Ferrell is one of my favorite comedic actors. Like when it's just bizarre and weird and obnoxious. I love Zach Galifianakis. You know, that particular strain is something that I really enjoy, and I just sort of want to continue that tradition in some capacity.
Is there any like, is there any sort of, do you have much experience with like British comedy? And is there anything from the UK that you like?
I've dabbled. I used to listen to that podcast. I haven't listened to it in a long time now, but the podcast that John Oliver has with Andy Zaltzman, I listened to that religiously for a few years. I've watched the original Office, of course.
Yeah.
Which absolutely deserves the hype it gets. As a child, I was into Mr. Bean.
Nice.
Big time.
Me too. Yeah.
How could you not be? It's great comedy.
Yeah.
It holds up. I was also into, on the American side, I was into Ernest, who I kind of find as our Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
Like Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Camp, like the whole Ernest series of movies. I love those. I thought Jim Varney was a consummate professional.
I always imagine, I always imagine American comedians must draw loads from. I always think of British comedy. Obviously, being British, I always imagine British comedy is quite important in like. In the world of comedy. I suspect it's not. I suspect I've got a really overinflated idea of what English comedy means to other people. But you know, I'm a massive American comedy fan as well. But there's so much good stuff here. There was so much good stuff here for a while. We had a golden era for a small period of time.
Yeah, well, it seems like the British comedians who have been the most successful. In the U.S., I would say are probably the ones who moved here and then sort of reinvented themselves as an American comic whose gimmick is that he's British.
Yeah.
So I would kind of say Ricky Gervais is near the top of that list. I would put Russell Brand on there, though I understand that he does still do a bunch of UK content that I just don't know about.
Yeah.
I've seen like clips once in a while of him still being famous and relevant over there, whereas I'm assuming. I don't know. I don't hear much of Ricky Gervais doing anything outside of Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know, that seems to be where he is. You know, and various other people whose names, or John Oliver, another great example, someone who kind of came over here, but I find reinvented what he was doing when he was over here.
Yeah.
But there is also, you know, like there's definitely a contingent of people who like watching, you know, comedies like the IT Crowd. Or like the chat shows and stuff like that. Like I've had coworkers at day jobs who are like deep into that stuff, but they find that on YouTube, you know, or they like spoof a UK IP and like get the BBC. Like it's just because that's another thing is it just becomes like where the paywalls land. I've stopped pirating content. I used to be a big time, you know, I used to watch a lot of stuff. Don't ask too many questions. But like.
Stuff was seen.
I think the industry got.
Let's not question how.
But I think the industry evolved to a point where, you know, the streaming services and like the iTunes style stores you know, the Google Plays and Amazons and whatnot, have become a reasonable way to consume content.
Yeah. I
But
think.
even then, I'm like sort of, I've always been a budget shopper. I'm sort of living on an artist's budget in a sense. And so I try to like get the most bang for my buck. But that leads to a lot of stuff being cut off at a paywall.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's sad, you know? Because it's like, wow, the only reason why I'm not watching this is because I would have to, you know, spend $15 and I have other stuff to watch. So I guess I'll watch other stuff.
Yeah. I think
That still happens.
I think at some point, someone, I think even maybe it was Brian Brushwood, was saying about people won't pirate stuff if they can get it. If there's a reasonable, if we can reach like I think for a while, like TV and DVD and videos, they just had a free reign, didn't they? They could just do whatever they wanted, and but like they needed to be reasonable. They needed to be like a reasonable amount of money for a reasonable amount of content, and like Netflix came in, stepped up, and kind of put that that idea in place. Like Amazon Prime, I pay for both of those, and I'm pretty happy with that. And then I buy whatever else I want, so kind of complement the bits. But before that, people would just steal stuff because it was like so disproportionately expensive to get. It was like, didn't seem fair. It was kind of a strange situation. So I think it's been good, really.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm totally on board with you on that. Like, you know, from my perspective, I'm 28 years old. I got on the internet when I was 6.
Yeah.
My mother let me go on the internet unsupervised, and her only advice was, don't meet anyone in real life, and if anyone asks, you're 18. So, and then she just let me be a child unsupervised on the internet, which I then continued to be. But yeah, do that math and figure out my stance on piracy.
Yeah.
I entirely think Brush was right, where once the industry, like, because that's the thing, is piracy rose the way it did. Like, if you read the book Appetite for Self-Destruction, about like Napster, how Napster impacted the music industry, and it covers like the build up to like how they got there and like the fallout after the fact. But like, you know, at that point, CDs had been like just jacked up as like a way to sell pop CDs for $25 instead of like the vinyl records, which were going for like 11.
Yeah.
You know, like just huge inflation in prices, like just to pad the bottom line. And you know, they were gouging. The industry was gouging consumers at that point, and the consumers revolted.
Yeah.
And finally, when they got services in place that were as good, and weren't, you know, trying to rip you off all the time, people moved back over.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
You know,
Me too.
absolutely. And yeah, so I've always agreed with Brushwood on that. But I think the way I'm starting to think nowadays is that the future. Because I also like I like the H3H3 YouTube channel a lot, and I like how they talk a lot about like their sort of business strategy as a channel, like because I find that to be useful, and I like what they're doing content wise too. I think they're really cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet them at some convention or something at some point, but they like. I think they're figuring this out too, because they keep getting screwed over by any sort of advertising supported business model, whereas you look at like Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak and their pioneering of the value for value model, where they say we're always going to put the show out for free, and whatever value you got out of it, send that value back to us. You know, write us a check for what you think it was worth. Sort of like what Radiohead did.
Yeah.
Within Rainbows.
Yeah.
But like, and Tom Merritt's doing that now. Basically, everyone on Patreon's doing that, and I think that. That's sort of where I want my mindset to be as I produce, because I think Bandcamp's accomplishing a lot of that too. You know, a lot of people I know who are musicians, they just push the Bandcamp and they're like, hey, you know, we released this for free everywhere, but like if you want a place where you can come and give us money for it, here you go.
Yeah, I think people have started to realize that like content doesn't happen for free. Stuff does happen for free, but there is a paywall somewhere, and I think people are starting to like try and support people that they want to do well, and that's why things like Patreon and Twitch and stuff like that, like there's a value for people who can have that like feeling of helping something that they enjoy, and I think people respond well to the idea that I mean, not everybody, but that you can give the people what you think is fair or what you can afford. You know, like I've been a Patreon for the entire time it's been out on Night Attack, Weird Things, and Jury, and it just ticks over, doesn't it? Because I want that content, you know, and I suspect that they wouldn't be able to do it if they couldn't have that money. So,
right, you know, they're not asking for much too. Is another huge thing. Is it's very fair. It's very reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is, but there's another element to it that I think is independent media versus corporate media. And when you look at it that way, corporate media is still sort of winning in the mass market. You know, like the independent media has never been more thriving. It's never been sort of more active and bigger and more influential, but it's still in second place because like there's still way more eyeballs that are having young Sheldon fucking piped into them. You know, like that's just that's just the reality of it. And then the sad part is you've got plenty of people who are like, you know, writers or producers or production people or actors, and they've like went to conservatories, they've like trained their whole lives, and they love their art, and they care about it, and they're sitting on their couch thinking, boy, I wish I could land a steady job on Young Sheldon. Yeah. Like that's like the reality of that sort of industry is, you know, there's something dark about that I find unsettling. So I think that based on that merit, I always tell people, I consciously say it, like, support independent media in all forms, because it's out there, it's more accessible than it's ever been. You can find something that like really appeals to you, and like, you know, HBO has enough money.
Yeah, yeah, right.
You know, and yeah, they continue to make good stuff, but like that money you spend on HBO watching like Game of Thrones episodes that like kind of haven't been good in several years, like, you know, maybe there's the whole cultural conversation element of it too. But I've found it's nice to hang around a comedy, like a local comedy theater, and like I spend less than I'd spend on cable. I see tons of shows. I become friends with the performers, and like you're all on the same page about your own weird little world. You know, you can't talk to Greg at the water cooler about it because he was watching The Walking Dead last night and also football.
Yeah, fuck you, Greg.
But like, you have your little world of people that all like the same thing you like. I always find that those smaller communities are better and they're thriving more, but we haven't figured out how to sell the general populace on it the way we managed to we being millennials, younger people, you know, digital natives, whatever term you want to apply to it, we figured out how to get like the mass market to use Facebook. You know, we sold Facebook to our parents and grandparents, and now it's used by like a third of the human race. But we haven't figured out how to do that with independent media. YouTube's getting there, but it still has this weird, you know, advertiser sauce that's creating all these problems now.
Yeah.
Twitch did an interesting job of it, but like only for the video game generation. But I think there's still, you know, there's still more breakthroughs to be had and more sort of styles to adapt to the new way of doing things.
I think that's good though. It's nice to be part of something that's like emerging.
Growing rather than dying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this could be the next thing, couldn't it? Really, it could be that like life could change. This could be.
I think it's already the next thing. It's a matter of, you know, what size next thing is it?
Yeah.
And what's the next thing?
What's the next thing? Virtual reality communities, digitally implanted in your mind.
It's not that long ago that TV supplanted radio, you know.
Aye.
And like radio still came back anyway in the form of podcasting. Like,
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? We've seen the last 20 years has changed everything, hasn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. What sort of as far as like community-based stuff, do you do anything to like foster that community? Do you have any like how do you sort of work with your community of people that watch your stuff, or how do you interact with them, engage them? Is there anything that you find works for you?
Yeah, I lately, for the most part, I do it on the local level. You know, I'm a very active member of the People's Improv Theater in Manhattan, which it's an improv theater that's split off from UCB during like the first few years of UCB. And I started taking classes there like 3 years ago, and now I like work there. I produce shows there. I like operate the light and sound booth. You know, I probably spend more money in their bars than I spend anywhere else, and most of that money I make like from shows there. So it like and it's fun. Like it's I'm just there every night, and that's a lot of what I consume now. You know, and like I come home and I watch maybe some stand-up specials or something, or like a couple of episodes of a TV show. But for the most part, I'm getting my entertainment in live and like watching my friends do it and like doing it myself, and I find that that's been really rewarding. And there's an improv theater in like every city now, at least one. It's crazy how big improv's gotten. There's like 4 or 5 in New York right now, and they're really good scenes, and it's good people there, and I find that it's more positive than your usual open mic scene. And there's no reason why you can't do both. Also,
Yeah.
I've had a harder time finding comedy communities on the internet. There's not as many of them, and it's mostly inside joke driven at a certain point.
Yeah.
So like the fun is catching up on the inside jokes, but there's also like a kind of you had to be there element to it. So that's something that I get, but I am less active in internet comedy centric communities now than I used to be.
Yeah.
I might switch back over. It's just a matter of just sort of reacting to the world around me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that puts people off getting into Night Attack, isn't it? It's this like perpetual inside joke, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, straight up. I was watching it back when it was BB Live show.
Yeah, nice.
And I stopped watching it during the NSFW era.
Really?
Because I missed 1 week. I missed the after show 1 week, and that was when the Diamond Club inside joke started.
Right.
And I felt like I wasn't allowed to do the Diamond because I wasn't there that night. And then the Diamond became everything.
Yeah.
So then I was like,
oh, fuck it.
Just like,
screw you guys.
Yeah. So then I let myself fall off, and now I check in every once in a while. I was very big into politics during the election cycle. I thought that Jerry does a good job of keeping the listeners sane during insane times. But yeah, that was just the thing where I haven't been able to get back into Night Attack, and it was kind of because I missed one episode,
It's mad.
and it kind of ruined it. It was an important one, you know.
I've had to like strip back to no after show, no pre-show, just show, weird things, Night Attack, jury, politics. I can't do any. That's it. I got no. I'm Harmontown. I got no more time. That's it. Like that's as much time as I got. I can't do after show, pre-show. So I just accept that I don't know what's going on sometimes, and some of the inside jokes are just lost on me, and I just think I don't mind. It's all right. It's fine. It'll be all right. I'll get through it. But I know exactly what you mean. It's like that is the thing that stops people from feeling connected to these communities, isn't it? You know, you miss something, and then you feel like you're not part of it.
Yeah, and that's something that you kind of, I think musicians and comedians are hypersensitive to that, because those are the fields where you have to be creating in real time.
Yeah.
Unlike taking in audience response in real time, and it's like, it always feels better to have more people like your shit.
Yeah. Unless
you're actually kind of a garbage person, you know. But like, it always feels better to have more people be into it. Like even if it's not like selling out, or if it's not even like a money thing, it's like, and also that doesn't necessarily mean dumbing it down. It's just making it more universal, making it more accessible.
Yeah. Well, we play gigs sometimes, and the gigs that are good are the ones that people get into. We are a band that is so emotionally, like, I think we just very delicate group of people, because when people aren't loving our music, we just kind of crumble, and it just becomes this like very clinical, just get it done. Whereas if people are liking it, that'll be the best show we do. And it's just, you know, that's people, isn't it? We're all very very delicate souls.
Yeah, and stand up when the audience is not behind you at all, we call that bombing.
Yeah, I bet that hurts. I bet that's really hard.
And it's killing when you do really well.
Yeah.
And that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, bombing, that's just sort of the thing that, you know, the first couple of times you do it, you wind up experiencing it, and it's just this very, very bizarre, awkward feeling where you're just in this dead room with no energy, and everyone's just sort of like awkwardly looking at you, and they wish they weren't, and you wish they weren't, but there's no way to end this, so you just like keep going on.
Keep going.
I played, and it happens to everyone, you know?
I played this open mic, and I used to play open mic for guitar. I used to play open mic all the time, and I decided I was going to do this tune, and for some reason I rehearsed it loads, but I started singing in the wrong key. I started singing like an octave below where I should be, and then I kind of tried to sing, and then I tried to like rescue it by going back up, and this was the first song I did in my set, and then I was like, I'm gonna play the rest of my songs, but it was bad. It was really hard, and like it was like dying. It was like dying, and I knew I had to stay up there. I knew if I left, I'd never play again. I had to keep going.
Yeah, the audience is like, is he going through puberty? What is this?
Yeah, it was really bad. It was really bad.
Yeah, no, I've been there. Like, I would like start a joke, and like I wouldn't get the first laugh on it, so I would just drop it. I'd be like, well, I'm not going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
So then I just kept changing topics too quickly, and it was just it became even more awkward. And I'm like, you know what? There's no. I guess we just got to work our way out of this one.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. Head down now.
Yeah, and then I left after, and then I got like 3 avenues away and realized I left my bag there. So I like had to go back, and it was still going. I had to and the door was right by where they were performing, so I had to like walk back in, like grab my bag, walk out. It was very awkward.
That's horrible. We're pretty much near the end of our time, John. So thank you very much. Is there any people that you'd like to give a shout out to? Anyone that you'd like to sort of promote?
I gave a shout out to Zeph Chota and the Trouble film before. He's one of my best friends. I wouldn't be making any progress in the industry if it weren't for, you know, being largely mentored by him, even though he maybe didn't even know he was doing that. So yeah, shout out there. Shout out to the People's Improv Theater. Great institution. A lot of great people there. A lot of great teachers that I've worked with, like Chris Griggs and Patrick McCartney. A lot of great staff. Andy Hilbrands, Matt Vita, a bunch of cool people in that community. Yeah, and plug vocalcomedy.com, Vocal Comedy on Instagram, troublefilm.com. That's where to find all the stuff I'm doing.
Excellent. Oh, great. Well, thanks ever so much, John. It's been lovely to chat, and we'll hopefully catch up again. You know, just anytime you got anything going on, give me a shout. Yeah, for sure. I have a bunch of stuff in the pipeline, so when I have something more specific, I will absolutely let you know. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okie doke. Well, this has been the Noise Filter Podcast. We will see you again next time. Cheerio. Goodbye.